Dr. Mancini is a neuroscientist. She leads the NOx lab at the Department of Engineering in University of Cambridge, and she also has this great ability to combine multiple techniques and neuroimaging tools to study the computational and cognitive aspects of pain. And just to say, she trained at the University of Milan, then at UCL, and we're very happy to have her here in Cambridge, where she's on an MRC fellowship. The title of Flavia's talk is Understanding the Neural and Computational Basis of Pain, Inference, Learning, and Adaptive Control. Thank you, Flavia.
Thank you, Paul, for inviting me, and thanks everyone for attending this session. If someone cannot hear me anymore, please just say it aloud, because I don't see the chat, I don't see the video when I'm presenting. So my title is actually surprisingly similar to that of Lauren's presentation, but actually my approach is quite different, and it's not an alternative approach, it's a complementary approach to understand the neural and computational basis of pain, and I'm focusing exclusively on the human brain for this talk. So the main, what we basically try to do is to understand the link between input and output in pain, where input is noxious inputs and output are pain perception and behavior. So the more conventional, the more traditional approach has been to in the human literature has been to use neuroimaging or different type of neurophysiological techniques to record, to measure neural activity in response to noxious inputs or in clinical pain states. And this has shown various regions that are active during pain. Lauren has already went through that, but the main problem is understanding what are very specific function. So my approach is to take a computational perspective on this problem, and I take this approach to basically link input and output. And by following Marr theoretical framework, we can distinguish different levels of analysis. At a computational level, we can ask what ecological problems did pain evolve to solve. At algorithmic level, we can try to think about how the problem is represented and solved from a mathematical point of view, or from a formal point of view. And then we can also investigate how this algorithm is implemented. What is the neural solution for this mathematical problem in the pain system, and more generally in the central nervous system. So the answer to the first question, what ecological problems did the pain evolve to solve, is actually non-trivial. So for transient pain, when pain comes and goes, the main aim of pain is to tell us there is something wrong and to ultimately maximize survival and minimize harm. So the main two functions are to detect. So in order to minimize harm, we need to detect threat as well as control action. But obviously, when pain carries on for long periods of time and is not anymore linked to its causes, then the function of pain is no longer becomes to minimize harm, and there is a big question. There is a big question of what is it there for, and I'll get back to that later on. But for the moment, let's focus on transient pain. So the first aspect is, so we need to detect threat. And one mathematical, we could use current accounts of information processing based on Basian inference to describe how the brain does it. This is actually quite a new perspective. It hasn't done a lot, although the fundamental concepts behind that are already present, and actually you could they were already present, for example, in Lauren's talk, because fundamentally the idea of Basian inference is that the brain, or at least parts of the brain, are computing machines, and what they do, we don't have direct access. So our brain does not have direct access to the causes of our sensations. but then it needs to infer it. So in the case of pain, what the brain needs to infer, it needs to infer how much, whether the intensity of pain, how much intensity of pain there is, how much, whether it's changing, where it is, how is it changing over time, and whether the pain will increase or decrease over time. So how does it do that? Well, the answer is that we don't quite know, because there aren't that many studies to do that. But we can develop the theoretical framework based on Bayesian inference, and based on the assumption that the brain computes probabilities. And according to this framework, the inference over a certain sensory features derives from the integration of prior knowledge, expectations, and this is actually completely in line with Lauren talk that she already discussed, and sensory evidence, current sensory evidence, and the multiplication of the two is what. So the inference is derived from the multiplication of the two. Now, there is some, pretty much everything that Lauren has presented is in line with this view, although it hasn't been actually formally tested. This Bayesian view has been formally tested in one previous study by Yoshida, showing that the uncertainty of the prior modulates pain intensity, so demonstrating that it is actually a relevant feature. And also imaging neural correlates for inferred pain intensity in the anterior insula and in regions that we know are important for pain evaluation and pain intensity. In my work, I'm particularly interested in how, in temporal inferences, so in inferences of how pain changes over time. We already saw in Yoon talks that pain tends to vary massively over time. And what we can ask is how the brain makes sense of these fluctuations, whether it extracts regularities to learn what will happen next. To learn and predict what will happen next. So I'm using simple stimuli, low and high pain, delivered in a sequence, and this sequence is probabilistic. And I apply Bayesian models of sequence learning to check whether participants are able to predict forthcoming pain using Bayesian inference. And by doing that, we have, so this is a preview of new results. They're not published yet, but we have quite good evidence now that human inference of pain probabilities of forthcoming pain is very closely related to an optimal Bayesian inference with a little bit of forgetting. Again, and this is just a preview. But then the other aspect is also how the pain systems is able to control actions, because one part is obviously inference is not useful if you don't do anything about it. And actually, there is quite a lot of literature in this field because we can refer to all the reinforcement learning literature in which to describe how different learning systems control increasingly with increasing level of complexity different actions in response to pain. So from simple innate responses like, for example, withdrawal that are governed by a Pavlovian learning system, to more complex actions such as avoidance that imply the learning associations between different stimuli or cues and outcomes. So what I am, so one issue is that this type of theoretical framework can actually be used to test what is going wrong in chronic pain states, whether anything is going wrong in chronic pain states, or whether anything is actually helping chronic pain patients to cope with pain. And so what we have initially tested is this how this instrumental learning system is its role. The role of these instrumental learning systems in inflammatory arthritis. And so this is studied on with Ben Seymour, Mike Lee, with a massive amount of help by Anna Gutesen collecting all the data. We used a very standard, very well-established paradigm to test instrumental learning, and that's the 4-arm bandit tasks. In this task, we're giving 4 options to participants. Each option can lead to either if chosen. So participants need to choose one of the 4, and this can lead to either a reward, a green token, a punishment, a red token. These are associated with actually monetary win and losses or nothing. And the probability of winning or losing is set by the computer. It's different for each box, and it also changes over time. So the task is quite different. We need to keep on tracking it. Overall, the patients are able to do the task quite well. And actually, in the same overall, they win the same amount of money as controls, which is good. It's reassuring. But the way we do the task is fundamentally different, and we can test different models to learn the association to learn how people decide which box to choose, how they assign values to different boxes, so to different choices. And the model, I will leave these to questions, but the model, the WINS is a model in which the values for punishment and rewards are estimated partly independently. We can extract different parameters from these models, and what we can see is that participants, this is the full distribution of the results in controls in patients. Participants and control learn in a very similar way from rewards and punishment, but what is different is that patients tend to be more sensitive to punishments than controls, and they also have a higher attentional lapses, so they are more distracted, they are less rational in their choices. And this is actually clinically relevant, because if you correlate punishment sensitivity and attentional lapses to the key clinical measures of pain, fatigue, depression, anxiety, it predicts actually clinical outcomes. So this is relevant, and if you do everything in the scanner, we can see that overall we see reduced prediction error signaling for both reward and punishment, with a region in the perigenual and subgenual anterior cingulate cortex that is upregulated, probably possibly to compensate for reduced prediction error signaling. Now, just to wrap up, I have proposed that we can take a computational approach as a complementary approach to the traditional approach to mapping the neurocorrelates of pain, to understand the link between inputs and outputs, and there is some promising evidence that Basian inference can describe how threats are detected and predicted, and value-based learning can describe the certain aspects of action control. And by doing this, we can start understanding the neural in more details. What are the specific function that different brain regions that are part of the pain matrix are carrying out? So to go more in depth to understand more the computational basis of that multivariate pain code that was shown by Lauren before. So this is the way the approach we're taking in my group. I just want to conclude with an appeal to two different populations. So first, we're looking for postdocs with neuroimaging and computational skills who are also interested in pain research. There are funded positions, so if you're interested, get in touch. And importantly, we really need, we shape our research based on what people with lived pain experience tell us. So we need their feedback to tell us which research we need, what they think of what we're doing, give input in research. I'm not talking about simply taking part in research studies. This is all done online. And to join the community, you can go to this link on my website. And thanks very much. I hope I haven't overrun.
Thank you very much. No, you haven't overrun at all.
Okay.
Pretty much exactly 15 minutes. Thank you so much.
Okay, Good.
That was a great talk. There appears to be one question. I think it's relating to this talk. It's not entirely clear, but I'll read it anyway. It's from Daniel Curtin, who says, "Thank you for the lovely talk. Why do you think there was so much deactivation in patients as compared to healthy controls?"
So they're not deactivation, they are, I'm trying to end the show. They're not deactivations, they are reduced activations.
Oh.
So it's decreased activity, is not a deactivation, but just a bit less activity, yeah. Great. In some regions, there is also more activity in others. I haven't discussed all results in detail, actually.
Great. And there don't seem to be any other questions, but as any come up, if you keep an eye on the ask question option, then it would be great if you could just open that up and answer any questions as we go on. I had one very small question. I mean, these alterations in essentially reinforcement learning and the development of expectations that you've highlighted, do you think they're very domain specific, or do they tend to extend to other sorts of tasks that don't involve pain, that maybe involve reward learning in other areas?
So I think there are certain, so it's both, I would say. So some aspects are really general. So there is like a common currency people refer to for rewards and punishment. And so that the general part is what actually probably explains the link with emotional disorders, for example. So you see always that cluster of chronic pain, anxiety, depression that goes together. But then there are also some more specific aspects that relates to, for example, pain inference that we can study with specific pain stimuli.
Great,
so
thank you.
It's both things, yeah.
Great, thanks, Flavia. Thanks for an excellent
talk.